Good afternoon and welcome back to another edition of NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinars. I'm Brian Gilbert and I'm thrilled to kick off another episode of NCIA's Service Solutions series today, our sponsored content webinar program, which allows business owners the opportunity to learn more about premier products, services, and industry solutions directly from our network of established suppliers, providers, and thought leaders. In today's program, we'll be joined by representatives of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Department of Cannabis Control to provide an overview on recent and upcoming funding opportunities being made available from their respective agencies. As we all know, California's historic transition to a regulated cannabis market has presented many unique opportunities and challenges for cannabis businesses. So in order to facilitate growth and encourage responsible stewardship of the state's most valuable asset, our environment, these state regulatory agencies have numerous grant programs designed to promote environmental restoration efforts and ease the transition from the legacy market to assist new social equity licensees with the arduous process of compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. So sit back and settle in for an information-packed program designed to facilitate public education of and engagement with these funding opportunities for small-scale operators. So to kick things off, I'd like to welcome our first presenter for today's program, Maggie Romo, who works at the Cannabis Restoration Grant Program at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. She's going to be taking over the screen share from here and diving right into today's presentation. So before you get started, Maggie, if you have any background or panelist intro that you want to provide for yourself before diving into the program, you can take over the screen share and just kick it right off from here.
All right, thank you. So yeah, I think that was a great introduction. And I know we have a lot to go over, so I think I'll just launch right into it. As introduced, my name is Maggie Romo, and I am the Senior Environmental Scientist working on CDFW's Cannabis Restoration Grant Program. And I'm here to give an overview of CDFW's cannabis program and then launch into details regarding our Cannabis Restoration Grant Program. So here is a brief outline of the presentation. I'll start with some general background of CDFW's cannabis program as a whole to provide some context, then go into the grant program with details on completed and current projects, and also talk about funding opportunities. So starting with CDFW's cannabis program build out, we first need to provide some context about cannabis in California in general. So in 1996, California became the first state to legalize medical marijuana with the approval of Proposition 215. This legalized the use, possession, and cultivation of cannabis by patients with a physician's recommendation. Then in October 2003, Senate Bill 420 was passed and offered clarification and guidance to Prop 215, and also established the California Medical Marijuana Program. Then in the latter part of 2015 and mid-2016, two different Senate bills were passed. Language in Senate Bill 643 guided the Department of Food and Agriculture in consultation with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the State Water Resource Control Board to ensure the effects of water diversion and discharge associated with cultivation did not impact the in-stream flow need for fish and to maintain natural flow variability. Then in June 2016, through Senate Bill 837, this built upon the requirement to enter into a lake and streambed alteration agreement, or an LSA, with CDFW for activities authorized by a license or renewed license for cannabis cultivation. And it also opened up different options to entities seeking an LSA and license. Then in November 2016, Prop 64 legalized specified personal use and cultivation of marijuana for adults 21 years of age or older. It reduced criminal penalties for specified marijuana-related offenses for adults and juveniles, and authorized resentencing or dismissal and sealing of prior eligible marijuana-related convictions. The proposition included provisions on regulations, licensing, and taxation of legalized use as well. And then June 2017, Senate Bill 94 was passed, and it merged California's marijuana laws into a single regulatory system for medical and non-medical commercial cannabis. Specifically for CDFW's cannabis program development, Starting in 2014 and 2015 through legislation, CDFW specifically established 7 formal positions to focus on preventing environmental damage caused by cannabis cultivation. This was known as the Watershed Enforcement Team, and now is the Cannabis Enforcement Program. Then through Assembly Bill 243, 266, and Senate Bill 643, this set forth standards for cannabis cultivation to protect and mitigate impacts to the environment, and added 31 positions to CDFW's team. Then through the passing of Prop 64, CDFW was established as part of the state's licensing procedure for cannabis, so that each licensee would need to go to CDFW for a lake and streambed alteration agreement or be approved to not need one based on cultivation procedures. And through this, there were 63 positions were added. Then starting with fiscal year 2019-2020 through the Cannabis Taxation Fund, this created a dedicated funding source that is continuous appropriation and defines CDFW's focus for the first 5 years on the cleanup, remediation, and restoration of environmental damage in watersheds affected by cannabis cultivation and related activities, along with land stewardship, investigations, enforcement, and prosecution of illegal cannabis activities. With this dedicated funding source, it helped build out CDFW's cannabis program throughout the state. And currently the program's focuses are permitting and environmental review. And so this work is with annual cultivation license applicants and provisional licensees. And we help in obtaining and submitting a lake or streambed alteration agreement, where written verification and LSA agreement is not required. We also have statewide outreach to facilitate education and relationships. There's also the Cannabis Lands Program, and this is to steward CDFW and partner-own and manage lands in a manner that discourages and prevents cannabis production and other illegal cannabis activities on these lands. There's also enforcement, and this is to support legal cannabis by removing illegal cannabis from the market on state and federal lands. But there's also a monitoring component, and this is working to establish a framework to employ long-term science-based monitoring and assessments to better understand the potential impacts of cannabis cultivation on California's fish and wildlife. And then we have grants, which is where I come in. So now I will launch into CDFW's Cannabis Restoration Grant Program, or CRGP, which I might say a few times. So some background here. In 2017, Assembly Bill 243 directed CDFW to restore watersheds impacted by cannabis cultivation in key areas of coastal Northern California. And CDFW awarded $1.3 million to support 4 restoration projects, which have all been completed by 2020. Then in 2020, tax fund dollars to help restore the Upper Eel River, which has been impacted by cannabis cultivation. Then in 2021, the objective for CRGP was to continue to develop partnerships for the cleanup, remediation, and restoration of sites affected by cannabis cultivation and related activities, which led to the release of our first solicitation. So through the Taxation Code Section 34019F2, CRGP released the Watershed Remediation and Enhancement Solicitation, which was a competitive opportunity and ended up awarding 4 projects totaling just shy of $1 million, and efforts were focused on the cleanup and remediation on public lands, wildlife enhancements, and road improvements. And some details on the 4 projects are listed here. We had the Barker Creek Road Sediment Treatment, and this was awarded to the Watershed Research and Training Center. And it is working on project design and road treatments to reduce sediment impacts to anadromous fisheries in Barker Creek watershed in Trinity County. We also awarded IERC, or the Integral Ecology Research Center. This project is focusing on the direct removal of refuse hazardous chemicals, environmental contaminants, and the dismantling of infrastructure from the illicit public land cannabis cultivation complexes within Monterey and Trinity County. And there's also a complementary component for this project to identify interested organizations and develop their capacity to implement IERC developed reclamation and safety protocols. There's also the Lost Coast Forest Land Flow Enhancement and Habitat Restoration Project, and this was awarded to the Salmonid Restoration Federation. And it will result in 100% design plans for off-stream storage and associated infrastructure to capture wet season runoff and augment dry season flows on recently acquired Lost Coast Forest land property. And this is located on the headwaters of Upper Redwood Creek in the South Fork Eel River in Humboldt County. The fourth project awarded was the Wildlife Conscious Certification Pilot Program, and this was awarded to the Humboldt State University Sponsored Programs Foundation. And this is a pilot program and it has 4 demonstration farms participating in its initial stage and is designed to improve wildlife conservation on cannabis farms using scientifically based management practices. And these projects are ongoing and due for completion, I believe, by 2024. As for 2022 so far, we have had 2 competitive solicitations released and 1 non-competitive. The first of the 2 competitive solicitations, and these closed in June, was the watershed enhancement solicitation. And there was $10 million available for funding. And eligible applicants, so those who can apply, were 501c3 nonprofits, public agencies within California, so state to local agencies, public universities, and special districts. And then California Native American tribes, as the term is defined in Public Research Code section 21073. And our project types were road treatments, cleanup and remediation on private lands, wildlife and habitat enhancements, and or water conservation. The second competitive solicitation was the public land cleanup and remediation solicitation. Again, this funding available was up to $10 million, and eligible entities were nonprofits, public agencies, or California Native American tribes. And the single project type we had and what we were looking for was for the cleanup and remediation on qualified public lands. And qualified public lands was defined as land owned in fee simple title and managed by federal, state, local government or institution, or California Native American tribal government. It also includes land held by the United States in trust for California Native American tribes. So just to provide some details, again, these solicitations closed in June and proposals are still under review. But what I can report is that under the public land cleanup and remediation solicitation, we received 2 proposals totaling $1.5 million and covered cleanup efforts in 12 counties across the state. Then under the watershed enhancement solicitation, we received 5 proposals with a total ask of $1.96 million, with restoration projects focused within the North Coast region of California. So now I will move on to our current open solicitation. This is the qualified cultivator funding opportunity, and this is non-competitive and has been open for applying since actually October of 2021. And currently there is up to $6 million available in funding, and we hope to have the opportunity open and accepting applications through spring of 2023. And the application process is multi-tiered. So first, there is an optional consultation request where potential applicants can meet with the Cannabis Restoration Grant Program and throw around project ideas and ask any questions as they pertain to the solicitation. The next step, which is required, is the submission of a pre-application. This pre-application is a Word document and is submitted to our email. And from there, it is reviewed, and eligible pre-applications will be invited back to submit a full application, which is done in our WebGrants web platform. Those eligible to submit pre-applications and the subsequent full applications are nonprofit organizations qualified to do business in California under Section 501c and have the capacity to meet the requirements of the solicitation and the executed grant agreement. And I would like to point out that this is not limited to 501c3s as our competitive programs were. It is another eligible applicant type is public agencies within California, and then the California Native American tribes as well. And I think the biggest hurdle of this funding opportunity is the fact that CDFW cannot grant funds to individuals or for-profit entities. So an eligible applicant is necessary to proceed. And again, those are 501c, nonprofits, public agencies, or California Native American tribes. However, the next solicitation requirement is that those eligible applicants must represent and the project must benefit the certain qualified cultivators as we've defined in the solicitation. And those are the specialty cottage outdoor, specialty cottage mixed light tier 1, specialty outdoor, specialty mixed light tier 1, small outdoor, small mixed light tier 1. And specifically with these classifications, we're looking to support the small, less than 10,000 square feet outdoor grow, or the use of less than 6 watts of artificial light per square foot. But another thing to mention is that cultivators with ownership and or financial interests accumulating between 10,000 to 20,000 square feet of total canopy may still qualify to be represented under the solicitation, but we will review those on a case-by-case basis because our main target really is to assist cultivators with less than 10,000 square feet of canopy. The project priorities under the Qualified Cultivator Funding Opportunity are the transition from a provisional to an annual license. And eligible activities under this project type include cleanup, remediation, and restoration, professional services, consulting, and infrastructure related to the cleanup, remediation, and restoration. Another project priority is supporting sustainable cultivation practices. And measures under this project priority should alleviate direct and indirect environmental impacts of cannabis cultivation and enhance environmental stewardship. So activities that may be eligible include sustainable water consumption, sustainable waste management, integrated pest management and disease management, erosion control, and or riparian protection. We are also requiring and emphasizing co-benefits within the application process, where the applicant needs to describe and measure quantitatively or qualitatively how the project will provide co-benefits to either habitat or species conservation or to the promotion of equity. So just to provide some stats for this, again, the opportunity has been open since October of 2021. And so far, I've conducted about 20 plus consultations. Again, this is not a requirement. We have received 14 pre-applications. And for the full applications, 3 have been completed and reviewed, 4 are currently under review, and 2 applications have been approved for funding, and 1 is been formally executed, and another one is just about to be executed. So the 2 that have been approved for funding, the first was awarded to the Sun and Earth certification, and this is the Sun and Earth Capacity Building Grant, and it's planning and capacity building to support sustainable cultivation practices for Sun and Earth's cannabis cultivation network. And the grant will also provide the framework necessary to help cultivators secure an annual license and support sustainable projects on the lands associated with Sun and Earth. The second is the South Fork Eel Sustainable Water Systems Project, and this was awarded to the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District. And these funds will focus on 3 cannabis cultivation sites and will be used to design and install 3 rainwater collection systems, provide irrigation infrastructure upgrades, develop and implement an invasive species management plan, install native pollinator-friendly plants, and prepare site-specific CEQA documentation required for cannabis cultivators in Mendocino County. So again, just to provide a summary, our total funding available right now is $6 million. The eligible applicants are the public agencies, 501c nonprofits, and California Native American tribes. The cultivators that need to be represented are defined under their specialty cottage, specialty, or small. And our project priorities are the transition from a provisional license to an annual license and or sustainable cultivation practices. And so I wanted just to take a few moments to talk about the future of CRGP. And there's been a couple ideas thrown around and discussed. And again, I want to reiterate that these are preliminary. And some things that we have talked about is extending the qualified cultivator deadline. So again, it has a sunset date of spring of 2023. But if we extend it out, we could perhaps add some more money beyond the $6 million, and also have an additional focus or priority to benefit threatened and endangered species. So that is one idea that has been thrown out. We've also been discussing a version 2.0 of our watershed enhancement solicitation, but it would have a different look and different feel. And so it would be an open opportunity. So it would be looking like our qualified cultivator opportunity. We wouldn't have this hard deadline for applications. And we would also have this open sort of deadline where it could be spring of 2023 or fall, really depends. We would also group the project types for road treatments, cleanup and remediation on private lands and qualified public lands, wildlife and habitat enhancements and or water conservation. So again, these are some ideas, and love to hear from you if you have any ideas that we could throw around as well. I also wanted to provide this busy flow chart because I know it's kind of hard to keep track of what's going on with CRGP, but again, our current only open funding opportunity is the qualified cultivator opportunity. So you can really use this to help guide you. And so are you eligible to receive funds? So again, that would be a public agency, nonprofit, 501c, or California Native American tribe. And if you are, and you are representing a qualified cultivator as we have defined in our solicitation, and that the project is directly connected to an active legal cannabis cultivation site, and the project priorities will either lead to the transition from a provisional license to an annual license and or support sustainable cultivation practices, I think that's great. And I highly encourage you to contact us at the email provided here and start working on that pre-application because you could be eligible for funding. That being said, if you've said no to some of these, there are some options that are in the works. And so again, if we are re-releasing a form of the watershed enhancement solicitation, there's a broader breadth of project priorities that could be funded under this. And it also doesn't have to have a direct nexus to a cannabis cultivation site. It would just need to, the project would just need to occur within a watershed that has been impacted by cannabis cultivation. And just if you have any other questions or anything like that, I do encourage you to reach out to our email here because we are very open to receiving project ideas and are very supportive of outreach and creative ideas. And so with that, here's a link to our email along with our Cannabis Restoration Grants webpage. And again, I'll be here to answer any questions after we go through all of our slides. Thank you.
Aha, I'm muted. Sorry about that. I put an extra layer on it so I didn't yell into this over the next time. So apologies about that again, but thank you so much, Maggie, for being able to dive so deep into the specifics of this program and really how this is going to be applied, and also focus on some of the people that have already been recipients of it. Like I was saying in the chat room, we have a long history with Sun and Earth certification here at NCIA. They produced a number of our sustainability workshops at our California-based conferences over the last few years. So really great to hear and see that. So I think we're going to continue right along. I'll try and put the email addresses inside the chat room so everybody can log those as well. But Sarah, I think you're going to pick up the conversation right from Maggie here and dive right into the DCC side of things. So with that, you can activate your video feed and then dive right into the presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian.
No problem.
Great. Thank you again, Maggie. That was a great presentation. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Banchero, and I am the Grants Manager for the Department of Cannabis Control. I'm going to give a brief overview of our newly developed department. We have just reached our 1-year mark, so happy birthday to us, and give a kind of an overview of some of the current grant programs we have today. So the Department of Cannabis Control is the California state agency that licenses and regulates cannabis businesses. DCC regulates growing of cannabis plants, manufacture of cannabis products, transportation and tracking of cannabis goods throughout the state, sale of cannabis goods, events where cannabis is sold or used, and labeling of goods sold at retail. The DCC was created on July 12th of 2021 by consolidating 3 former state cannabis authorities. These legacy departments include the Bureau of Cannabis Control within the California Department of Consumer Affairs, the Cal Cannabis Cultivation Licensing Division within the Department of Food and Agriculture, and Manufactured Cannabis Safety Branch within the Department of Public Health. Originally, grants management was housed within the department's acquisitions office, but we quickly grew into its own program and was officially established in February 2022. The Office of Grants Management is responsible for forecasting, planning, and oversight of activities associated with grant funding. It is our mission to manage and facilitate funding opportunities presented to the California cannabis industry in a fair and ethical manner that supports the Department of Cannabis vision to create a safe, sustainable, and equitable cannabis market. The Office of Grants Management administers state grants from the initial request for a proposal to funds dispersal and through post-award auditing. Each grant is conducted individually and collaboratively with several divisions in the department. Components of grant management include solicitation or request for proposals, award notices, contract and agreement processing, reports and tracking, final reporting, and eventually audits. This is an example of the divisions that are involved in our current grant programs. Collaboration is a key component to grants management, and these divisions assist with the different stages of processing or serve as subject matter experts depending on the needs of the grant. So we've quickly gone over who we are and a little bit of what we do, but most importantly, I think a big question is, where does grant funding come from? The process of grant funding begins in either the governor's office or legislature, where money is earmarked for a specific funding area or population. DCC is then tasked with drafting a regulation package to define grant specifics, including applicant requirements, use restrictions, and timelines. Our department offers cannabis-related grants to local governments to fund programs and university to fund research. So currently, DCC has 3 active grants, and these, again, are all in different phases of our grant cycle. We have the Local Jurisdiction Assistant Grant, our Cannabis Academic Research Grant, and our newly passed Cannabis Local Jurisdiction Retail Access Grant. I would like to note that the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, otherwise known as GoBiz, actually manages the Cannabis Equity Grants Program for local jurisdictions in California. Even though our local jurisdiction assistant grants do have an equity component, all other equity grants are administered through GoBiz. Okay, let's talk about some of our important grants that we have going on. Our local jurisdiction assistance grant. The program proposed by Governor Newsom in the 21-22 budget and passed by legislature provides $100 million in funding for local jurisdictions to aid in more swiftly transitioning high numbers of provisional cannabis licenses into annual licenses. A significant number of these provisional licenses represent small, equity, and legacy cannabis businesses. Under the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, annual licenses are issued by the department once an applicant or licensee meets all requirements for annual licensure. The department has authority to issue provisional licenses if the applicant submitted a completed license application that confirmed compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act and local ordinances are underway. The Act contains specific timelines for when the department can no longer issue or renew provisional licenses. Therefore, provisional license holders must complete the annual license process by certain dates or face a potential gap in licensure, which is definitely something we want to avoid. The grant program directs funds to those jurisdictions with the largest populations of provisional licenses in the state. The 17 eligible jurisdictions include the top 8 jurisdictions with the highest number of provisional cultivation licenses or with the highest number of provisional manufacturing licenses, and the top 8 jurisdictions allowing all other cannabis activities, excluding events with the highest provisional licenses. Jurisdictions that fell within those 2 criteria had also implemented an equity program, received additional funds to support the transition of equity businesses into annual licensure. Eligible jurisdictions and funding amounts were specified through the Budget Act. $47.5 million in equity-specific funding was given to 8 jurisdictions to provide additional support to assist with equity businesses as they transition to annual licensure. Examples of these local projects include hiring staff to process licenses, investigating in technological infrastructure to increase efficiency, and developing tools to increase access to compliant spaces. Here are the 17 cities and counties that were awarded grant funding in amounts ranging from $400,000 to $22 million. This shows our grant timeline. The application period closed November 15th, 2021. Grant award notices and agreements were released in December 2021 and January 2022. Payments were released between January and April of 2022. Some jurisdictions do require board supervisors' approval to accept grant funds, which can delay receiving a signed agreement and thus receiving funds. Once our agreements are processed, they're submitted to our state controller's office, and they have about 45 days to submit payment to our grantees. Biannual reports for this grant are due every August 15th and January 15th. And final expenditures for this grant are due March 31st, 2025. So as that grant is in our current agreement process, we are going to move into our Cannabis Academic Research Grant. Authority for this grant is from Proposition 64, a voter initiative passed in November 2016, which legalized the non-medicinal act use of cannabis. One of the significant components of Proposition 64 was the imposition of taxes on the cultivation and sale of cannabis. A portion of these taxes, $10 million annually until fiscal year 2028 to 2029, has been designated for grants to public universities to research and evaluate its impact. Prior to the establishment of our department, this grant was managed by the Bureau of Cannabis Control, or BCC, and titled the Public University Research Grant. This was originally solicited in the fiscal year 2021 to cover 3 years of funding. BCC granted awards worth $30 million to 34 California university research projects. Post-consolidation, the agreements are now managed by our office and still called the Public University Research Grant. Research proposals must fall into one of the several specified categories, which include public health, criminal justice, and public safety, economic and environmental impacts, and cannabis industry research. A detailed description of the list of research subjects for the grant funding is contained in California Revenue and Taxation Code section 34019. And of course, if you'd like any of this information after the presentation, I would be happy to present it. We are excited to announce the release of our upcoming solicitation for our Cannabis Academic Research Grant. We anticipate soliciting for this in August 2022, so coming up very soon. Release is targeted for August 22, as I mentioned. This request for proposal, or RFP, will contain the type of requested research, application instructions, grant agreement details, and more. There will be a Q&A period to submit questions pertaining to the request for proposals, which will be answered via Q&A document that will be released after the request for proposals. The application period will open in September 2022 and will be open for 30 days. Once applications are received, they are reviewed for accuracy and completion and then submitted to our scoring committee. Grant award notices and agreements are expected to be sent out at the end of October and into early November 2022. And once signed agreements are received, they can start our agreement process, which ends with the invoice submission for payment disbursement. Once all of the payments are sent into State Controller's Office, we do anticipate payments between December 2022 and January 2023. Since this grant details are still currently being finalized, we do not have any suggested research topics to share at this time. However, here is some helpful information regarding this year's solicitation. So we will be releasing 2 years of funding worth $20 million. This grant is open to all California universities. Grant funding is capped at $2 million per project. However, the department may consider approving a limited number of grants if the proposed projects are complex or is a longitudinal study. The request for proposal will be released on the department's website at cannabis.ca.gov or the grants portal website at grants.ca.gov. So the last grant I want to touch on today is our upcoming Cannabis Local Jurisdiction Retail Access Grant. The Cannabis Local Jurisdiction Retail Access Grant is quite a mouthful. This passed with our May revision budget. There are currently 363 cities and counties within California that do not license storefront cannabis retailers and 360 cities and counties that do not license delivery-only cannabis retailers. To assist the cities and counties of California, the May revision includes $20.5 million of a one-time general fund to establish a Cannabis Local Jurisdiction Retail Access Grant Program. This grant program is intended to provide funding to support these local jurisdictions in the development and implementation of a local retail licensing program. This program aids to provide consumers with better access to regulated tested market by supporting the expansion of California's legal cannabis market. We do anticipate soliciting for this grant sometime in 2023, but we are still developing the early stages of this whole program. So thank you again for your time today. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at grants@cannabis.ca.gov. We are excited about our future existing with funding opportunities presented to the California cannabis industry. Thank you again for your time.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Sarah, for diving into that as well, giving us the DCC side of things as it relates to all of these amazing opportunities and programs to receive free funding for these various different elements. It's amazing to see you all spreading it so far and wide and really trying to increase engagement with all those different elements. I think we're going to transition right into the Q&A portion of today's program. So let me stop my screen share, and Sarah, Maggie, and Janice, if all of you all want to activate your video feeds, join us up on the virtual stage here. And as I said at the beginning of the program, Janice Mackey is with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife alongside Maggie. And she's the one that's been working with our team primarily to get today's program on the calendar and pushed out to all of you amazing members. So with that, I'm going to turn it right over to Janice to dive into moderating the question and answer segment of today's program.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you to both of our presenters. That was wonderful information. These are two new emerging grant programs that have started in the state of California. So it's great to see them forming, taking shape, moving forward, all this great stuff that's going on. For the first question that we have, this is for Sarah. And this pertains to, you showed a slide with dispersal of grant funds for each of the counties. And you may or may not have information on this. When will grant funds for Mendocino County be distributed? And that is from Will.
That's a great question. So the local jurisdiction assistant grant actually started with 80% of the grant funds being awarded at time of the agreement. So once those funds have already been distributed to Mendocino and all of the other jurisdictions at this time, the original 20% will be released once we have determined that the goal of the grant has been established. So prior to the 2025 year, we will be looking at releasing those final funds.
Excellent. This one is for Maggie. How does a cannabis cultivator get started with your qualified cultivator program? Are there any steps that you could recommend for someone to get started?
Yeah, I think oftentimes our qualified cultivator funding process can be a little intimidating. So I think the first step really is for cultivators to contact our cannabis grant email or contact me directly to set up a consultation where we can discuss project ideas, what they need to have done to either get an annual license issued, or if they've thought about measures to promote sustainable cultivation practices but haven't had the funds to complete those, that we can start talking about what's appropriate under our solicitation. And I think then the biggest next step is for that cultivator to start doing some outreach for eligible entities. So contacting local nonprofits, contacting the local RCD, the Resource Conservation District. As an agency, we can't endorse any eligible entity, but you can go to our website and start seeing the projects that we're approving and the entities that we're working with. So I think that can be a helpful guide for cultivators to start getting an idea of who might be a good entity to reach out to.
Excellent. And this is a question that I think that people want to know. I know that these are, we have the newly formed DCC and, Fish and Wildlife's cannabis program has been around just a few years. If people have ideas for grants, can they contact the agencies and say, hey, I have an idea that might make a good grant solicitation?
I can definitely speak for the Cannabis Restoration Grant Program with CDFW. Absolutely. What's been really fun about our program, it's a live program. It's not set in its ways. And so again, either through consultations or just setting up outreach meetings, we can discuss where we can direct funds that can really benefit those in the industry, benefit restoration, benefit cleanup, and be creative with it. And so that's been a joy for my job, at least. And so, yeah, if there's ideas where we can kind of move the program, we are open to those conversations.
Great. I got this question from Upia, and I believe this is for Sarah. It says, I will be moving to Oakland, California in October from New Jersey, and I'm interested in retail suggestions on anything I can do now. My husband is currently there and having a hard time getting information. This seems like a little bit more complex than to have in this conversation, but if you submit, drop your email address into the message, I will have someone get back to you, and we'll try to help you get the answers you need.
Yes, please. And we also have a great website online. So cannabis.ca.gov has a lot of information that would be very helpful in that.
Excellent.
Yeah, perfect. I tried to cherry pick a spot that I thought might be good on your website really quickly, Sarah. But again, just to sort of add on to Janice's remarks there, I'll put up a contact information slide shortly when we're transitioning into the final thoughts for the program. So when that gets up, please do feel free to reach out to Sarah at any point. I'm sure there's a ton of other upcoming educational and networking opportunities that the DCC might be involved in as well over the next few months that can give you get you up to speed on how to enter into the retail space.
Excellent. And then one last question here. What are some, and this is for both presenters, what are some common pitfalls when people are applying for grants that you see that, that could be avoided, or there are some best practices for avoiding them?
Do you want to go
ahead.
first, Sarah? Yeah.
I'll go ahead and take that first.
You know, whether you're in academics, whether you're a cultivator, whether you're a nonprofit, accessing these funds, you know, coming from the grant side, you know, we want to, we want to get money into the hands of folks, in this program. And so what are some common pitfalls that people can avoid or that you see that could be avoided?
Well, one of the things that we have mentioned before is that unfortunately our grants are only open for local jurisdictions and public universities at this time. So one of the things that I would suggest for any of our grantees applying for our applications is definitely reach out if you have any questions. We have our grants mailbox, so grants@cannabis.ca.gov is a great place to reach out if you have any questions. Check out our website. Definitely read the documents. There is a lot of information on how we would like to see the applications that are listed in those documents.
Excellent.
I think for CDFW's grant program, we are starting to solicit entities that have not applied for CDFW grants before, and so they underestimate the time commitment it takes for applying. And I think there's also a lot of details in our solicitation that some don't think apply to their certain project. But again, as Sarah said, read the documents that we provide closely. They can I don't know if it's good nighttime reading or what, but what we have in our solicitation is what we follow through the application process and then through the grant application process. So we don't want to have any surprises through the development of the budget, through the development of the tasks. So again, I think just read those documents carefully, because we do try and provide instructions through the application process and link it to certain specific sections within the solicitation. But I think oftentimes with our full application, I mean, it's a 35 page document that's then translated to our web grants platform. So it can be very intimidating. But again, with our non-competitive opportunities, I'm here for answering any questions and to work through this as best as I can with the applicant so we get good projects. But again, it is time intensive.
Okay, very good. These are some great information for our folks. Now I'd like to ask both Sarah and Maggie, since you're up and speaking, do you have any final thoughts?
I just really encourage people to reach out. Again, as I said, we're a living grant program when adapt and develop opportunities to really enhance cleanup, remediation, and restoration and support cannabis cultivators. We are trying to release new opportunities and adapting those solicitations to best suit how we see the programs growing. And so again, just reach out to us, ask questions, send in pre-applications so we can get the conversation going.
And I just want to say thank you all again for your time today. We're very excited to present these opportunities and see where this program goes, watch us grow. Definitely reach out if you have any questions or just want to get to know the program a little bit more.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Maggie and Sarah, for delivering the bulk of today's presentations. I know that, as you said in your final thoughts, Maggie, that some of these things can seem very daunting and seem like a chore, but the other side of this is that this is going to help you ensure that your business is thriving and that you're putting the actual reclamation work into the local environment to really ensure that all of the legacy market, that the issues that we had with a legacy market are corrected moving forward into this. So we really appreciate all the work that you all have done on the regulatory side of things to get these programs up and running. And we're happy to help promote them to our California-based network of cultivators who are going to be taking advantage of all of them. So with that, we're going to transition out into the outro of today's program. So I think Sarah and Maggie are going to leave the virtual stage. Thank you all so much again for presenting, as well as Janice for jumping in here and moderating the Q&A session so we could keep it focused on the bulk of the presentation. As they all mentioned, please don't hesitate to make use of the contact information slide. All of you will be provided a PDF version of today's presentation file via email. So stay on the lookout for that for that email to come from the back end of Zoom over the next 48 to 72 hours. And then if you do want to immediately rewatch today's session, it will be made available first on the live stream that we've been conducting alongside the broadcast today. So you can head to NCIA's Facebook at any time to dive deeper into today's session. And then we'll also get a formatted video recording of today's program published on our YouTube page at the end of the week or first thing early next week. So stay on the lookout for that. And if you have any other people amongst your network that might be able to take advantage of these really great opportunities, please don't hesitate to share or connect them with Maggie, Sarah, or Janice directly. And yeah, thank you again, Will Stevens, for that great question. And then just a quick note for any of you all in the room. I won't spend too much time on this, but if you haven't heard us promoting it via our social channels and our website, please do be aware that we are returning or bringing back our 10th annual Cannabis Industry Lobby Days. It's going to be taking place this fall from September 13th through the 14th. It'll be your opportunity to return in person to Washington, D.C. with the nationwide network of NCIA members for the first time since 2019. This provides you an opportunity to unite and advocate for the issues that are most important to small cannabis businesses, ranging from safe banking to federal descheduling, all while being able to share your personal stories with national lawmakers who need to hear from you today. You can find out more details by heading to NCIA's website, contacting me or any of the NCIA team following today's broadcast. And please do make note that membership is required in order to attend. And the actual event comes at a very nominal fee, just $30 in order to secure your presence and get our government relations team working on the scheduling process for all your in-person meetings. And then for all of you all that might be based in Colorado or for any other nationwide cannabis businesses that are amongst NCIA's member network, please do make note that you all are awarded an allotment of complimentary tickets for all of our in-person networking and educational events, of which the Colorado Industry Social will be taking place this Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. in Denver, Colorado. Don't leave those tickets on the table. Make sure that you invite any of your Colorado-based colleagues or industry network at large to attend this event. And if you are a non-member based in the area, it does come at a cost of $30 to attend as well. So feel free to reach out to any of us on the NCIA team to learn more. And I hope to see you there on Thursday in person. And with that, thank you all so much for participating in another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar. It feels really great to beat the heat together while engaging with our network in a live format. So we sincerely hope that you'll continue your participation with these interactive educational opportunities throughout the year. If you haven't already, make sure to head to the events section of our website following today's broadcast to secure your spot in those two in-person events that I just mentioned, along with a slew of other virtual educational programs that we have on the calendar through September as well. And then also, if you haven't already, make sure you are signed up for our weekly Events Digest newsletter, which will help keep you up to speed on all of those activities across the board, as well as provide supplemental resources to make the most out of your involvement with all of these sessions. So huge thank you once again to the team from the Department of Cannabis Control and the California Department of Wild Fish and Wildlife for presenting today's program. We'll leave you all with this member event appreciation credit sequence, highlighting all of our member businesses that participated in today's program. And then if you don't see your business here, don't be discouraged. That just means you need to head to the cannabisindustry.org/join following today's session to join the movement for a responsible and equitable and sustainable cannabis industry. Enjoy, and hopefully we'll see you all again next week for another Industry Essentials educational webinar this Thursday in Denver for our Colorado Industry Social, or this fall in Washington, D.C. for our Cannabis Industry Lobby Days. Thank you all again so much. Stick around for the next few minutes while we're going through the credit sequence and get those last questions and connections made in the chat room. Thank you so much. Have a good one.